am your host, Carolyn Solo, LCSW, EMDR therapist, and mom of 3 daughters. Thank you for joining me.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode 119 of the Future Template Parent Podcast. I am your host, Dr. Carolyn Solo, PhD, LICSW, EMDR therapist and consultant, and mom of 3 daughters, and coach for intensive therapists. First of all, my apologies for not getting an episode out last week. Life happens, as we know. We actually had to move to a new rental house last week, and you all know moving is a lot, and when you have 3 kids, it's an extra lot. Thankfully, it wasn't the same as a year ago when we moved 4 states away with everything. This was a much easier move for many, many reasons. And we moved to a better location. We're actually next door to my middle child's best friend now, whose mother is also my closest friend in town. So that's great. We're only 5 minutes from school. That's great. But still, a move is a move. And of course, one of my kids got sick during the move, and our babysitter got sick as well. So life happens. Episode didn't happen. Very little else got done except getting through the week. We all have to give ourselves grace at times. And something that I know, speaking of giving ourselves grace, but also building a business at the same time. And of course, intensives, thank you, intensives, for giving me the flexibility to take a lot of time off when I was dealing with all that. I will always tout how intensives make that so much easier to work around. But anyway, something that has continued to help me grow and be successful in my business is definitely giving myself grace when needed. And this was a situation in which it needed to happen. And I just had to be like, this is what's going on, and I will just accept it and not, obsess over it and feel and beat myself up for not getting it out like I always do, getting everything done like I always do. But I gave myself grace and got right back to it by getting another episode out. So get right back on the horse. Life happens, and you can still keep moving forward. Give yourself grace and move on, right? Here I am back again. So that's a little life update for me, but back at it this week. And this week I want to talk about imposter syndrome. I feel like I have talked about this a lot, but the fact is I keep talking to therapists and it keeps coming up. So it's always something worth talking about and worth being reminded of how we can all, one, that it's a struggle that a lot of us share, and what we can do about it. So I want to sort of think about, why does it come up for EMDR intensive therapists, this imposter syndrome, and what can we do about it so it doesn't sabotage us? Because that's what it does. It sabotages our progress. So this recently came up, imposter syndrome, in the fall cohort of my group program. Right now we're in right in the middle of the program of my group program, the EMDR intensive, 12-week intensive that I'm now running. I run in the fall, and then I'll run it again in January for the spring, winter, early spring. But anyway, for this group, the fall group, we've just started module 3 of 6. Module 3 of 6 just started this week. And so last week we had our group call for module 2. It's a wonderful group of therapists, as it always is in this program. These women are all successful private practice therapists who are already charging high, premium therapy fees, $200 an hour, $185, all in that range, $220, and have clients, right? Have a pretty full one-to-one therapy practice. But in spite of that, they're burned out. It's not sustainable. Intensives are what they want, right? So, but even still, even though they've built a successful practice, the move to intensives does kind of freak them out and does kind of have them questioning everything. And imposter syndrome is coming up for them all as they start thinking about offering this new service. I was looking back at the transcript of this call with this group, and the 2 major ways that imposter syndrome was showing up are in the 2 areas for the therapists in this group, which I think are the 2 places that most people stumble. Those 2 things coming up are, 1, how dare I charge these fees, the multi-$1,000 fees for a 3-day intensive? And 2, what if I don't give the transformation my clients expect from this intensive? And of course, these two fears overlap, right? If you don't feel confident in what you're offering, it feels very hard to charge a premium rate. So the two have to go together. And that's why I focus in equal measure in my course and in my one-to-one coaching on the marketing and mindset stuff and the clinical skills that you need, teaching you the clinical skills that you need to create that transformational intensive so that you can feel like I have something really, really valuable that I can charge a lot of money for that will get people results. So hopefully that can push back a little bit against some of that imposter syndrome. But what I have found is no matter how prepared people are, no matter how much experience they have, no matter how many skills they have, imposter syndrome still comes up, right? So what is it? Why do we have these fears and worries and anxieties and insecurities? Why does imposter syndrome rear its ugly head for so many of us? So taking kind of an ego states perspective, as I so often do, what parts of us get activated and bring up that imposter syndrome when we think about offering such a high ticket service? What is that I'm an imposter and everyone's just going to find me out part, voice, whatever, trying to tell us? And of course, we know that all parts of us have a purpose, right? And for most of us, maybe all of us, the imposter syndrome part is trying to be protective, right? If we keep ourselves small, if we tell ourselves we're not good enough to do this, that we don't get to do this because we're not good enough and it won't work, then one of two things will happen. One, we won't try, and then we won't have to face the ultimate fear of failure, which is what it's really about, and this validation of the belief that we're not good enough, right? That we will be found out. But if we don't try, then we won't have to have that experience. Or 2, we do try. What if we do try, but we're hounded by that fear, and that holds us back, and we do still struggle, and then we'll say, look, that imposter syndrome part was right. I'm not good enough, and I'll stop trying so I don't get hurt again. This happened one time, didn't work. Not good at this, I'm done. And of course, often for many of us, things don't work out perfectly the very first time we do them, but that imposter syndrome part can really take that and run with it. And this might not be your experience. You might pitch an intensive to a client. Your first time you pitch one, they say, yes, this happened to 2 people in the group this past week. They're only in, like I said, we just started module 3. We're not even halfway through the program. And 2 of them have already had 2 clients, or one of 2 different therapists have each had a client say yes to a 3-day intensive. So they're not even done with the group, not even halfway through. They just went ahead and did it and kicked that imposter syndrome in the face, which is what I'll talk about. Like, what do you need to do to get to move through imposter syndrome? And so they didn't fail, right? They got a yes. But sometimes we just say, I'm going to do this, I'm going to try. And then someone does say no. And that can feel really hard. But one no doesn't mean no forever and doesn't mean no from everyone. But if we use that and we say, oh, imposter syndrome was right, and we let the imposter syndrome win, it's just going to continue to perpetuate itself. See, remember that time where you screwed up, where you failed, where that person said no? But that's sort of giving into that imposter syndrome, right? And where does this come from? Where do we get these beliefs and these fears? For so many of us, it's the flippin' white supremacist capitalist patriarchy. Of course, it's not for nothing that many of the people who are drawn to work with me are women. We women are used to being told we have to be small. We have to be palatable and not ask for too much and not have a voice. We have to not upset anyone, right? We have to just do what makes other people happy and doesn't take our own needs into account. We have to be palatable, not ask for too much, not have a voice. We should, maybe even let other people take care of us because we can't do it ourselves. But that takes away our agency, of course. Or we shouldn't do it ourselves, right? Like, it's not our role to be making money and getting, being successful, because we're supposed to, as women, that's not what we're supposed to do, right? That's not being a good little woman. And let me say, these voices seem louder all the time with that whole, the trad wife resurgence on social media and in our culture and all that stuff. And we've all grown up in this culture and this world. So these, maybe it's getting louder now. Maybe we feel like we're going back in time, which in a lot of ways it does feel, of course, like we're regressing big time. But these voices have always been there and we grew up with them, these messages, which is why they have so deeply penetrated, our beliefs about ourselves. And also, so many of us learned that making money was dirty. I certainly did. And wrong. That people who have money are bad, especially women, right? That it was our job as women to make other people feel better, to help others without needing anything in return, beyond the satisfaction of being a helper, right? That's the most we should get. But we should be happy with just the fact that we're doing it at all because it's our role, right? Zero acknowledgement there of what it takes from us to help others, the emotional labor and exhaustion that it takes from us to help others, right? And the emotional labor is an expense, a huge expense that we bear even before all the other expenses that we incur to become EMDR therapists, right? Certainly being a therapist, there's huge amounts of emotional labor, but we're supposed to do it for $10 an hour or whatever. In community mental health, $20 an hour. But let's just think about all the other expenses that we incur on the way to becoming EMDR therapists. Grad school tuition, that's up to hundreds of thousands of dollars for some people, certainly tens of thousands for most of us. Advanced training, licensing fees, CEUs, the cost of running a business. Not to mention that in the world we live in now, things get more and more expensive every damn day, right? It's very expensive. I was talking to a friend of mine yesterday who is a single woman. She's like, how expensive it is to be a single woman? The world is not built for single women to be, financially stable, right? It's very expensive for a couple to live on a single income. It's very expensive for a single person to live on a single income, but certainly a couple. It can feel damn impossible to raise a family on a single income, especially if we're talking that $40K a year community mental health job. It can feel damn near impossible now to raise a family on two incomes. If we're sort of sticking with that income that keeps us small, right? And I'm not going to get too far into how capitalism creates problems and then sells us solutions and all that stuff. But, this helping people for the sake of helping is a crock, and it ignores so much about the reality of the work that we do and the incredible cost of living also that we're trying to live in, right? And, also when it comes to like charging high fees and doing something new and scary like intensives as a woman, we're told that we're not supposed to be conceited, whatever that means. We're not supposed to be full of ourselves or too big for our britches. We're not supposed to want accolades or recognition, certainly not financial compensation. All of this pushes back against, creates this imposter syndrome when we do try to do something bigger, right? I know, would ever dream of saying this stuff to a white man, right? Most white men do not think, oh, I don't deserve to be paid this much, right? And let's not forget, of course, how many more layers of discrimination and hate and disrespect non-white women endure, and members of the LGBTQ population, and undocumented folks, indigenous folks, all those people with those multiple layers of discrimination, multiple layers of marginalized identities. All this negative messaging is true multiple times over, right? Even more so than for white women. If white women are supposed to be small and quiet, well, non-white women are not supposed to exist, right? So that imposter syndrome is loud for those of us who have any of those identities. And the more of those marginalized identities people have, the more messaging you're getting from the society that, like, you don't deserve any of this. How dare you even try, right? So imposter syndrome. So all this gets at where it comes from for most of us. But what do we do about it when it comes to intensives? Well, I want you to know I can speak from a reasonable amount of experience on this. Obviously, there's my own experience where I just said, screw it, I'm doing it anyway. And I'm learning from my mistakes and I'm sticking with it when it gets hard. Even when life is coming up, even when I've had a move and a kid sickness, I'm still showing up. I'm still figuring out how to continue to make my voice heard, because that helps with the imposter syndrome. The more we stick it out and create a name for ourselves, the more we believe in ourselves. And then all the experiences of all the therapists I've worked with who all struggle similarly with this imposter syndrome. I don't think I've ever coached a single therapist ever who doesn't say some of what I just talked about, right? So what's my advice then? Well, the best medicine for imposter syndrome is doing the damn thing anyway, right? Like these two people in the group right now who just were like, okay, I'm going to do it. I have a new consult call on my calendar this week. I'm just going to offer them an intensive. They did it and they got yeses. They're just doing the damn thing anyway. And now they're like imposter syndrome of what do I do with this time? And that's the normal next step, but we'll get through that too. But do the damn thing anyway, right? Think like a white man, as they say. There's some statistic about men and women applying to jobs, right? And that women feel like they can't apply to a job unless they fit 100% of all the criteria. And we know that like those criteria are kind of like pie in the sky ideal applicant would have all these things, right? But a lot of women are like, oh, I don't have 2 years of experience. I have 1 year and 8 months of experience doing this, so I'm not going to apply. That's not enough. Right? Whereas men will apply if they fit something like 50% of the criteria, right? So those men who only fit 50% of the job description criteria go ahead and apply, and they think in the words of the great Mindy Kaling, why the hell not me? So that's what I want you to think about yourself when that imposter syndrome about intensives creeps in. Why the hell not you, right? I know you are a competent and skilled EMDR therapist who gets excellent results from clients. Why would an intensive be different, right? Why wouldn't you be qualified to offer a transformational intensive? Maybe you need some help with the structure, with knowing what skills you need. That's all fine. I can help you with that. But you can do that. You have it in you already to do this, right? And regarding the fees, who's going to pay this? I promise you, there are other intensive therapists out there charging premium fees, charging, $5K plus for a 3-day intensive. I've seen up to $10K, okay, people charging $10K and getting clients. All these people are finding people who will pay that, right? It's about your marketing and positioning yourself and who you're talking to for referrals. Like, that's what it's about. Is it going to be for everyone? No, but that doesn't mean it's for no one. And that doesn't mean, like, if one person says no because it's too expensive, that does not mean you've priced it wrong. It means that person isn't the right person. And that's okay. This isn't going to be for everybody. It can't be for everybody. You don't need it to be for everybody. You need it, 10, 12 a year, whatever your goal is. And people are finding people who will pay those rates. I promise you, I've seen it in every single cohort of my group program, and I've seen it with my one-to-one clients. And of course, I see it with myself, right? And the more we challenge that imposter syndrome and feel confident in our own worth, right, the more we're going to get those results, which will reinforce that this is possible. We have to look that imposter syndrome in the face, honor why it exists, going back to that parts work, recognize that it's a part of us, that imposter syndrome is a part of us that's trying to protect that younger, wounded part of ourselves that's so afraid to fail, is afraid to let someone else or ourselves down, is afraid of being found out, being an imposter, being found out of not being enough, not being who the rest of the world thinks we are, although that's only our perception, right? And we are, we are great. We really are. You are great. Even if you're afraid that everyone's going to find out you're not. You're not perfect, but who is? And if imposter syndrome is saying that we have to be perfect to do this, well, then none of us would do it, right? What does it mean to be perfect? And everyone has to start somewhere with intensives. Why the hell not you, right? So that part is trying to protect that young, wounded part of us that's afraid to fail, right? Afraid of what happens when we let someone else or ourselves down, right? Very important, right? Afraid of being found out, of not being enough. And how do we heal that part? By lovingly, compassionately asking that imposter syndrome part to step aside right? So that we can comfort that wounded child part and say, we're an adult now. We can handle this. We can do this, right? This is something I say to people and over again that I've heard from the great Felicia Boyle of The Bad Therapist. Running your own business is a spiritual practice. We look at those darkest, deepest corners and parts of ourselves, and we help heal them by doing the difficult thing, right? How healing it can be to do something big and bold and scary and show that wounded part we did it, that young part, that scared child part. We can change our practice model. We can offer intensives that change lives. We can charge premium fees. And hey, you've probably been through some of this imposter syndrome already when you first started charging private pay rates in your private practice. And you found people who will pay even though you never believed that they were out there, okay? And they now pay you $225 a session, whatever your rate is, week after week, month after month after month, year after year, right? You had to do the work to get those people, just like you have to do the work to get intensive clients. But that's what you have to do. You have to do the work. Imposter syndrome should, if it's telling you they should come to you without trying, well, that's not reality-based. But, the imposter syndrome is like, even if you do try, it won't work. I know that's not true, right? Let's kick that imposter syndrome in the face by doing the damn thing and show younger you that kick-ass adult that you are now. I know it's possible because I've worked with so many therapists who've done it, and I'm doing it. And hey, if you need some support in kicking that imposter syndrome in the face, and you think support would make a difference in helping you just do the damn thing and say, why the hell not me? I have a couple of one-to-one coaching slots open for therapists this fall. I'm in the middle of my group program, so if that's what you want, January is the next cohort of that. But if you want to do this one-to-one, I can do this with you now. Reach out to me if that sounds like what you need. So yeah, a few thoughts on imposter syndrome. Thanks so much for joining me for episode 119. I hope some of my reflections here on imposter syndrome, how I see it show up for therapists, why it shows up, what we can do to conquer it. I hope some of that resonated with you and gave you some confidence. Please reach out to me on Instagram at Future Template Parent if you want to chat at all about how coaching could support your practice growth, or if you just want to say, hey, that podcast episode really helped me. I love hearing that. That makes my day. That's why I do this. Hey, look, speaking of imposter syndrome, the imposter syndrome I had when I started this podcast was off the charts. I thought, who the hell am I to talk about this? I've just been doing this for a year. But I decided to just kick imposter syndrome in the face. I kept thinking about this podcast idea over and over and over again. And I was like, this podcast idea is not going away. I'm going to do the damn thing. And I did it. And look where I am, 100 and almost 20 episodes later, right? And I know I've helped so many people, and that has made it all worthwhile. Like, so many of you I know have made progress in your intensives practice from listening to the podcast. And if I hadn't started the podcast, if I hadn't looked down imposter syndrome and said, screw you, I'm doing it anyway, I know this is a good idea, none of that would have happened, right? So yeah, I'm happy to be the person cheering you on if that's what you need and holding you accountable so that imposter syndrome does not conquer you. Let's not let it. Okay. We need more intensive therapists in the world. We need you out there doing the damn thing. You can. Okay. And facing down imposter syndrome a lot of times is part of the process. Hey, if there's someone out there who can make a huge change in their lives for the better in their practice and their business without having that, please tell me who you are so we all can learn from you. But, all of you are capable of conquering this. I know you are. Sometimes it really means what you need is that other person cheering you on. I would be honored to be that person, but you can find that person in lots of places. But, I hope you hear my voice in your head a little bit when some of these things come up for you. So be well, everyone. Thank you, as always, for listening, and I will talk to you all next week. Take care.